So you're wondering, how can a photo save your life? And for me, this has happened multiple times. When life's most difficult things happen to me personally, I'm so happy that I have the memories of my ancestors and their photos, the ones that I do have, to keep me grounded. I keep certain photos, as you can see behind my head, especially when I'm having a bad day or when I'm having a tough moment or a very difficult time in life, whether that's experiencing hurricanes, health issues, or whatever. I always turn to these photos. And in this one particular photo, in fact, it's three photos of my Mama Bell. So Mama Bell is one of my second great grandmothers on my maternal line, and her life and everything that she has experienced in her life has helped to guide me through some of my most difficult times. She and my grandmother Lizzie, that you'll learn about a little bit later. But let me tell you about Mama Bell London Jefferson. So all of the women in my family, when they reach a certain age or just a certain level, we all refer to them as mama or auntie. And Mama Bell was one of the largest matriarchs that I know of in our family. She was born in Clinton, Louisiana in 1888. And when Mama Bell was born, she was born on a plantation and reared by both her mom, Sarah, and her grandma, Polly. Mama Bell's story is one of strength and resiliency. If I can describe the environment in which my grandmother grew up in, she was on a plantation that dealt a lot with lumber, but most of the females in her family were all domestic servants. Most of the guys in her life pretty much worked in the lumber industry. So Mama Bell grew up around all of these women who were always relying upon each other. They were always working together to get things done, whether it's sharing information through the kitchen or sharing information at church. Mama Bell's life, because she grew up so closely to her ancestors, she understood their story. She was on that land where her ancestors were enslaved. In fact, I have in my possession a will of Mama Bell's grandmother in which she was valued at $150 on that will. Prior to Mama Bell, no one in my family, for the most part, could read or write. But that didn't stop her from being the woman that everyone loves in this community. Her photo can be found in every household in our family. And for me, when I looked at that photo, I often wonder why. Why is this one photo of this woman, and that's the photo on the left, that black and white one? Why is this photo in every household? As you can see, Mama Bell had a very modest life. She worked as a domestic servant most of her life. After being born in Clinton, Louisiana, and helping to raise her brothers and sisters, she married her husband, Alex Jefferson. And when an opportunity presented itself to the family, Mama Bell, along with all of the other women in our family, along with the men, they left Clinton, Louisiana, and they moved to Des Salmons, Louisiana, and they worked on a sawmill there. At that time, Mama Bell was still being the incredible woman that she was. She helped to take care of everyone around her. And it was that instinct that she had, along with Grandpa Alex, that told them when it was the right time to leave. When they left Clinton, Louisiana, and traveled to Des Salmons, I can imagine they were afraid. I can imagine they wouldn't know what to expect. But they did it anyway, and they trusted themselves, they trusted each other, they trusted everything that they were being guided by. And they moved our family to Des Salmons, Louisiana, where my grandmother was born, on the bayou, in fact. The most interesting thing that I found about Mama Bell, she did all of this with a very limited formal education. So one day while Grandpa Alex was working on the sawmill, he lost two of his fingers. And that was a very trying time for our family, considering that time in the early 1900s, Mama Bell relied heavily upon Grandpa Alex's income, but she still had skill sets of her own. So again, instinctively, when it was time right before the flood hit in 1927, our family left Des Salmons, Louisiana, and traveled to New Orleans. To take care of her family, Mama Bell worked at Mother's Pies, where she baked pies, where she did domestic work, where she worked at a boarding house. And even that boarding house where she worked, she had a direct impact on that family. If you were hungry around Mama Bell, she knew how to add certain ingredients to a pot of red beans just to stretch it, to make sure that everybody in her community ate. My Mama Bell raised every generation from the age of 14 until she died in 1971. My uncles were raised by Mama Bell. Her life and her role in the community you still see evidence of it everywhere in Uptown New Orleans, whether it's the recipes that we cook or just the traditions that we still practice because of her and her love for us. She would often get up early, prepare food, and then walk to work and then walk back to help to take care of her family. That photo on the very right is a photo of her holding her great-grandchild. And again, if she was home, everybody had a place to stay. That photo in the middle of Mama Bell is the family that she worked for at the boarding house. No one in my family had that photo. That photo was given to me by a descendant of the family that where Mama Bell worked at the boarding house. And that person told me that his ancestors died talking about Belle Jefferson. That's my Mama Bell. And I often get emotional about her because for me, I see so much of myself in her. And I often wonder why, like, I experienced so many things in my life, especially at such an early age. And I often tell myself, like, why me? And I can hear voices telling me, like, why not you? I knew that I had to be strong. I didn't know how strong I had to be. And I didn't understand why I needed to be strong. But after searching my own family history and understanding everything that someone like Mama Bell went through, I learned why I was so strong. When I found my family on a wheel, along with Grandma Polly, 6 members of my family were valued at $1,800. And that didn't stop them from being who they were. That didn't stop them from sharing our family history. That didn't stop them from learning, whether they told someone if they learned or not. That didn't stop them from working together to get our family into a better position. So when we left Clinton, our family didn't own anything. When we left Des Salmons, our family didn't own anything. But when my family came to New Orleans, when my maternal ancestors arrived here, they brought with them the strength and the willingness to work together. The thing about being strong is you have to know when you can lean on people. And that's the one thing I learned from Mama Bell. When I look at her photos, I remind myself on how important it is for me to be strong when it's time for me to listen to my instincts. And when it's time for me to work together to help guide our family to the next level. For example, I lost my only sister during Hurricane Katrina. When my family left New Orleans, it was a few days before Hurricane Katrina. In fact, it was like the Friday before. I remember it was a Friday because that morning we took my mom to get dialysis. I begged my sister to leave. Almost in my gut, I felt like something bad would happen, but she didn't want to leave. So my family and I boarded a truck. While we got in my SUV, my dad and my mom got in the SUV, and my mom was exhausted for traveling. During a hurricane evacuation, the traffic is horrendous. A 1-hour trip can take you 16 hours sometimes. But I heard this voice in me that told me which direction to go into. And I can imagine that's the same voice that Mama Bell heard or her family heard when it was time to leave Clinton. And they had to be very brave to do that because they were going to land that they only knew that there was a possible opportunity there for our family to do better. But like my story, it wasn't an opportunity to do better. This was an opportunity. We needed to survive. So when we left New Orleans, we headed to Baton Rouge. All of the hotels were booked everywhere. For miles, you couldn't get a hotel room. But something told me I didn't need to stay in Baton Rouge with my mom. We got on top of the bridge in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which is about an hour or so from New Orleans. And I saw this brand new hotel. And something told me while I was driving, yes, I did the call while I was driving, but hey, while I was driving, I called this hotel and I managed to get the last 2 rooms. My mom was relieved because she knew we only had about a little over an hour to go. And once I got my mom in this room, I felt this relief. I knew that we made it to safety, but I had this feeling inside of me that something bad was going to happen. So I did talk to my sister that night as the storm was moving through. Then we lost power, and she just told me, just remember, I'm your sister. And that was the last time I heard from her. At this time, I was studying for my bachelor's degree. At this same time, I was going through the world's most horrible divorce, and I was a single mom trying to raise 2 kids. So I had all of these things together, plus taking care of my parents during the storm. But I remembered my sister telling me, hey, I want to pay for your cap and gown. I want to make sure you graduate. I was going to be my mom's first child to graduate. And I knew that the line that I came from Mama Bell didn't graduate from high school. I knew that my grandmother didn't get to do it. My mom and I did it the exact same year. So I knew how important it was for my family for me to do this. So when I evacuated, I took some of my stuff with me. I can remember thinking about Mama Bell walking to and from Mother's Pies, walking to and from the boarding house. And I can imagine she was very tired because she worked very long hours, but she did it. I was in school trying to take care of my family, trying to communicate with family members, and I had the only working cell phone. So I got all of the calls, and I had to make the decision on when I can disseminate that information to my family. And I could imagine, much like Mama Bell, when she became the matriarch in the family, she was one of the oldest living relatives on that side at one point in Des Salmons. I can imagine people going to her looking for guidance. So eventually my family and I left Burbridge, Louisiana, and traveled to a very small town in Louisiana. When we were there, I felt that this wasn't a place that we were going to stay at a very long time. And I can remember telling my parents, we have to leave. We have to leave. And we have to leave first thing in the morning, because if we don't leave by this time, we're going to get hurt. And that was me waking up after a dream and telling them we have to get up and leave. Around this time, that was our buddy Hurricane Rita, who was coming in and threatening the neighborhood that we moved to. And we went there because my mom asked to be closer to her youngest brother. And I got emotional just now. I have to state this. And this isn't anywhere on my record. Her youngest brother, my mom went there to be closer to him. And he actually died last year. So that's why I got emotional for a moment. But I want to show you, even in moments like this, I can rest knowing that before he passed away, he taught me everything I know about Mama Bell. And that's another important thing. So in my mom being by her brother, I knew that even then, because of what I know and how much everyone trusted and believed in me, when I told them it was time to leave this particular town because something bad was going to happen, they left. We all left. We left there and we traveled to Memphis, Tennessee. And at that point, I knew my mom was going to be okay. I knew we were in safety. But 24 hours later, that town in Louisiana was underwater. All of the power was out, and I was pretty sure my mom was going to die if we stayed there. And I knew from that moment forward, I had to be the strong one. And I understood that I was strong, but I didn't understand how strong. You want to know, I really found out how strong I was when that very same semester, January 2006, when I stood on the stage at Southern University at New Orleans. I took 6 classes online and I got a 4.0 GPA. And when I walked across that stage, I knew who I was doing it for. I was doing it for me, my kids. I was doing it for my sister, but I was doing it because in my heart and mind, I knew I made my Mama Bell smile. I can recall like my auntie Eva, who again was raised by Mama Bell, and she always said she believed that our generation would be the best generation and we're going to be the generation to change everything for our family. And I just knew that I was strong. Like I survived all of that. I came across the stage with 2 kids under my arms and just literally graduated and became everything that someone told me I would never be. I wouldn't exist in this role if it wasn't because of the women who sacrificed so much before me. When Grandpa Alex was injured on that sawmill, my Mama Bell did not say, "Oh, I'm going to break down and cry and this is just the end." She stepped up and she worked at Mother's Pie. She stepped up, she worked at that boarding house, and no matter how tired she was, she pushed through. And that's the thing that I've learned. Sometimes I'm going to be tired. Sometimes fibromyalgia is going to beat me up. But the important thing is that what we should do is just never give up and pull together when we need to. When those women in that family were hungry, they pulled their resources together to make sure that everyone had something to eat. And much of now, everything that I try to do, I try to share everything that I have because I know what it's like to be without. And I learned that from Mama Bell. I learned that it's not as important on what you have on the outside, but everything that you have on the inside that matters. I learned from her the importance of spending time with your family members, with the people in your community, and the impact that you can have on your community by just being a good person. And sometimes you have to be tough and you have to be strong. But I think she wants all of us to know that the most important thing that we have is each other. I think a lot of times when I look at Mama Bell's photos and I see her hands, I see a hardworking, gentle woman. And her hands, if you just focus on her hands, it just shows you how strong this woman was. And she commanded every space that she walked into. I love when my mom talks about her. Like, say, for example, she had these big pot of red beans, and if she saw more people were coming over, she would add okra to the pot. It would thicken them up a bit, but she would have rice that she could stretch it out and feed as many people as she could because she knew what it was like to be without. I know that my grandmother took sugar, any ingredients that she could to make something, whether it was breads or pies or whatever, to feed whomever. But the most fascinating thing I've learned about my Mama Bell and her sisters is when they came to New Orleans, my Mama Bell and the women who look like her, they worked together and they pooled together their money and they bought their father a building. And that building was called Second Nazareth Baptist Church. And that's where Mama Bell gained all of her strength from. The women before her and her service in the community, but in addition, that church where she spent most of her time. The building is still standing. It's not within the family anymore. But I know when I look at that church and I look at my Mama Bell, I knew that she and her sisters cleaned toilets, cleaned floors, and did whatever they had to do. Trusted each other, pulled together their resources to get that first property that we owned in the city. And to me, that's amazing considering none of them could read or write. One of the things that I know most about my Mama Bell is reflected through the actions of my grandmother, Delilah Jackson Landry. In 1949, my grandmother became a registered voter. And just like Mama Bell, you see this photo. I'm going to transition from her to Grandma Lizzie. My Grandma Lizzie, I don't have a photo of her. So this photo is just going to stand proxy for her. It's of a cabin at Star Hill, Louisiana, and this is near the area where my Grandma Lizzie was living. Grandma Lizzie was born in Kentucky in 1839. She somehow, of course, due to slavery, came to Louisiana, and she lived in St. Francisville, Louisiana, again, about another hour or so from Baton Rouge. Grandma Lizzie was a midwife. Imagine that. My grandmother was a midwife. She's my third great grandmother, but I know from the census documents that she was a midwife. I also know this because whenever we would get sick, we often didn't get anything from the store to take care of our sicknesses. My dad would mix some type of elixir and give it to us, and it would be awful, God tasting awful, but we'd always felt better within a day or two. Grandma Lizzie had, oh my gosh, at least 8 kids that I know of in St. Francisville, Louisiana. And I say because I know of, these are the ones that I can identify due through DNA testing and documents, because of slavery. And I'm not ashamed of that. I'm very proud of my grandmothers and everything that they've accomplished in the face of adversity. I know a lot of people, when they think about slavery and their ancestors and what they endured, it does bring pain. It does make you upset. It does make you angry. But me, I focus on the woman. I focus on the individual, because for me, almost all of my ancestors were enslaved. And when I look at these women and understand what they've done in the face of adversity and barriers and racism and everything else that you can think of, and I'm still here, I'm living evidence that they survived it all just for me to be here and be able to do what I'm doing at this exact moment. So even for Grandma Lizzie and her skills, she was able to deliver her grandkids. My grandma Classy, who was my second great grandmother, had 20 plus kids that I know of. And in fact, I think Grandma Classy just got tired of naming them, and she just named one of them 19. And I have a great uncle, called 19. I do. But the most interesting thing about this particular line, I know my Grandma Lizzie did her very best to keep as many of those people alive as she could, because the typhoid epidemic came and hit the community where my family lived very hard. My grandmother, Rebecca Clifford, she ended up dying very young. And that didn't stop her from doing what she could for her kids while she was alive. My grandfather, Carrie Clifford, is one of the hardest working men that I know of. But let me talk to you a little bit more about Grandma Lizzie, because I want to show you how, knowing who she was and how my grandma Rebecca and my grandpa Kelly taught me to fight back. My grandma Lizzie, as I said, was a midwife, and I've always been fascinated by St. Francisville. But up until a certain point of my life, I've never been to St. Francisville. I've been to the land and the plantations where Grandma Lizzie worked when they came to Point Capee parishes, but I'd never been to St. Francisville. So when I had my son in 2016, I had really bad postpartum depression. I didn't want to leave the room. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to do genealogy. I didn't want to do our Mammies. I just hated everything. And I guess at some point my husband just felt like I was really going downhill, but he knows how I feel about taking medication that I don't really need to take. So he got me in a car one day and he drove me to Glen, Louisiana, where my family came from. First, we went through Clinton. I saw that area. Of course, when I went there, I thought about Mama Bell. But when I got to Glen and I remembered every place, every building, every road that my ancestors worked on, I remembered every sugarcane field that I was taught about. And I remembered how strong I was, because even then, the women in my family, who their photos are etched in my mind, I lost them to Hurricane Katrina, but I do have them in my memory. I remembered how strong and how resourceful I am and how I can beat this. So I told my husband, I'm okay. I'm really okay. I thought about my Aunt Alice Bradley, who owned the juke joint next door to her house, and how smart she was, and how she had two separate books, one that she kept to show the plantation owner about her funds that she had, and then the real books where her real money was, and how she was able to maintain that land. In fact, that land is still in the family now. I learned about how our family built most of the buildings in that area. And to me, that just represented excellence. The fact that most of what we built is still standing in that parish. I knew I had a reason. I knew I had something to do. I knew that I needed to step up and really do what I love to do. And that's to talk about my ancestors and encourage other people and empower them to get out there and go and learn about who they are, because I know how important it is and how it can save your life. So it worked. It snapped me out of postpartum depression. And if I don't want to go shopping at the Disney store, if I don't want to do genealogy, you know I'm sick. And I was sick. But because I saw that area where my family came from, it empowered me in a way that it's almost like I felt like I had to live to do something greater. And that I felt that if this could wake me up, or if this can strengthen me, then more people needed to see it. And more people need to learn about themselves through learning about the people who came before them. So it worked. Just a few years later, I was at work, and I was actually helping to prep for a program on a battlefield, and I was in a plantation home, ironically cleaning the table there. I got very sick the next day, and I was so sick, I went on all kinds of medication, and then I noticed that the hearing in my left ear was starting to get lower and lower. In fact, it went all the way down where I couldn't hear on my left side at all. So again, being someone who loves public speaking, I love presentations, I felt like my life was over and this is it. I felt broken. I felt useless. I felt like I can't do what I love and what I fought so hard to do. I mean, I fought back 2 years to get where I am, only to lose my hearing. I felt like I wasn't doing what my ancestors needed me to do. And I felt like I wouldn't be able to hear people. And it was going to be hard for me to understand. I would go into restaurants and have a breakdown because the loud sounds would just send a triggering pain to my body. So again, I snapped into depression. And then my husband did the same thing again. But this time he took me to St. Francisville. And I'm just walking around, and I met this very old lady who was in a museum store. And I started to just talk to her about like Grandma Lizzie and the rest of my Nixon family from the area. And I asked her, I was like, hey, where's Bayou Sarah? I knew that my family lived there for some time, and I just want to go and see it, or just anything that's left of it. And she said, well, while you're there, just take a look at some of the churches that's around here. And she gave me this map, and she kind of showed me around in a museum and just pointed out some sites that she thought would interest me based on my family history. But she had a very sweet, kind, and calming voice, almost familiar, but I didn't know her. So I got in my car and my husband drove us down to the end of the road, and there was this railroad depot. And I looked around, and have you ever been somewhere and you felt like you've been there before? So I got out the car, I put one foot out of the car, I put my right leg onto the ground, and I felt this wind. And I heard this voice whisper into my left ear, and it said, "You are going to be okay." And I was fine. I got in the car, I closed the door, I told my husband, "I'm okay." And I was. I knew and I know that voice was my grandma Lizzie. And she's right. I'm okay. I am comfortable with getting in a room and telling people that, hey, I struggle with hearing on this side. So if I turn or if I'm trying to read their lips, understand this is why. And she's right. I'm better than ever because of people like Grandma Lizzie, Mama Belle, my grandma Rebecca, my grandma Delilah, all of these women and my memories of them, and just the stories and the documents that I've read and I've seen. I've witnessed them be laborers, domestic servants. I witnessed them serving in unions and everything else that they could do, fighting for their communities, helping each other, protecting each other. I knew that I would be okay because of what runs through my veins and the DNA that I inherited from those who came before me. I know that you're going to be okay. I know that you're going to be inspired by what I said today. And I hope that you'll take the time to get out and visit the land where your ancestors came from, no matter where it was. Go and touch the walls, touch the trees, touch the ground, touch the spaces, visit the cemeteries, visit your child homes. Whenever you're feeling down, whenever you're feeling like you can't, look at the people before you. You're going to find all of the strength that you need, no matter what is going on. You're going to find every ounce of strength that you need to push forward. Without a doubt in my mind, you are watching this presentation because you felt that you would be inspired by something. And I am a living witness that whenever people tell you what you can't do, they already see what you can do. Don't let them stop you. Don't let their words stop you. Think about my Mama Belle. If you don't have photos of your grandmother, just use my Mama Belle's photo. Just if you want further inspiration, you can also look at my social media pages. I don't hide anything that I go through. I don't hide anything that I've experienced. And I've just taken everything that I've learned about my ancestors and everything that I'm trying to do in the community. And I use our mammies as a tool to execute that. I created the General Store to generate revenue so that I can get out and do more free programs in the community. I take every dollar that people pour into me, into my work, to invest it back into the community. My greatest joy lately has been going into the high school classrooms and teaching very young adults how to research their family history. And because of it, even just within this past week, I met two relatives that are 93, one that's 93 years old and one that's well into their 80s. And they asked me to teach them our family history. Imagine that. 93 years old. To me, that's incredible. But I remember if I would have given up at any point in time in my life, I wouldn't be there to do that for them. I know that I have a calling on my life, and I understand that it's very important work. But more importantly, I understand who called me and what I'm here to do. So if I don't leave you with anything else today, it's just never give up. Understand that you have brothers and sisters all over this world, and we're all here. We're all here to help you fight back. But you can find all of the empowerment you need through every memory that's already embedded in your DNA. I remember the great Barbara Trevine told me that your ancestors are waiting for you to come and find them. And they're all here. I just, everything that I'm taught, I know that my grandmothers, I could feel their warmth standing behind me and telling me, good job, good job. And no matter who is gone or who left, they're just on the other side cheering you on, and they want you to fight back. So I thank you for spending your evening with me and listening to me. I really appreciate you all.